It's like, it's like your dad was like, "Oh, get in the car, kid. We're going to the zoo." And then you actually went to the zoo instead of Home Depot. And you're like, "Wow, maybe Randy's not such a bad stepdad after all." And then you got to the zoo and he bought you food and took you to see all your favorite animals. Oh yeah, I think you know what time it is. Welcome to another episode of Glaze Review. This is a very simple playlist on my YouTube channel where I pick up glazes from the shelf, I test them for you on some brown clay, I test them for you on some white clay, and I usually do it on multiples to make sure that there's consistency in the glaze itself. There's nothing that I hate more than picking up a glaze, it works one time, and then I put it like on something else and it doesn't work a second time because I either got lucky or I didn't know what I was doing. So we're gonna test it 2 times on this is gonna be a mix, and this is some brown clay, just to make sure it comes out good on brown clay as well. I'm also heavily open to suggestions, so if you want me to test a glaze that you're curious about, put it in the comments below. Today's glaze review is about Rainforest C-49 from AMACO. It's a Celadon glaze, and it's kind of like a darker green from the other ones that we've tested before. We've tested plenty of green glazes from AMACO on this channel. Some jade, some rainforest, well, okay, this is rainforest. But this one seems to be a tad bit darker, and AMACO's pretty good about consistency. So here's what we're gonna do with this glaze today. We're gonna test this glaze 2 times on this clay body right here. This is B mixed with grog. This is my standard clay body for most of my functional stoneware. I'm also gonna put it on a red clay body just to see if it changes color a little bit. But I also put a little bit of green underglaze on this because I really wanna see the contrast in between this green and this green right here. If it makes a really nice contrast, then I can use these 2 together in some of my other artwork. And I'm also going to be glazing this right here. For anyone who knows about my podcast, which I will link down below, me and Lindsay M. Dillon run a podcast called Peddlers. So I decided to make like some fan merch, I guess you would say. Granted, I'm still going to use this as a test because this is the only one in existence right now. You know, we put a little bit of rainforest right here and put a little bit of Randy's red on top and mix some red and some green, make it all Christmas. Okay, now that we set the stage, let's get glazing. Okay, so let's take a look at these real quick. This Mud Peddler's mug has Randy's red on it with the glaze underneath it. This one here is a poured version of the glaze, while this one is brushed. I noticed a couple of you in the comments below asking me to brush it on as the instructions say, but I've already made an episode on proving why I pour my glazes versus brushing them. They usually come out a lot better, and I usually end up with far better results and stability, so I don't see a reason why I shouldn't keep doing it if it works. Hear me out, this is a forever rule. If you think it's dumb, but it works, especially if it works better, it's not really dumb, you're just stubborn. This one here is the glaze all by itself, nothing else on it. This is a B mix with grog clay, and so is this. This one has Randy's red on top though, because even though I can compare the 2 bottoms of the cups just to say that like they're both constant and they work on the same clay body, I still don't want the same copy of the same mug. I want to make one a little bit different. So here are all of our testers. Keep in mind that these are white clay and these 2 are brown clay. Okay, now that everything's out of the kiln, let's take a look at our base test here. this came out pretty nice. And the Randy's red up here doesn't look too bad either. Although I will say it's kind of muted. So like you couldn't really tell this is Randy's red unless I told you it was Randy's red. But the actual Celadon part is doing its job. You can see through it. There's two factors to a Celadon glaze on like a usual historical basis. Usually you can see through the form and it's kind of clear and not so opaque. You can see through it, so if you draw a drawing or like a little silk screen or something much like this, you can usually see through it. In fact, I don't even think I needed the wax resist over this symbol. This cup just already had the wax resist over it and I just kind of grabbed it. But I don't think I needed to make this part raw with wax resist like I did in order to make the full visibility of this symbol. It very easily could have gone directly through that symbol and we would have seen it. Granted, there's a couple people who think like Celadons melt really well over texture. That's kind of true and kind of not true. There's a bit of texture over here, and most of the time it just becomes a little bit darker in a certain place. It doesn't like melt over anything. You can really see the color combination right at the bottom, and you can really see the textured finger marks, the throw lines, in the inside of the mug. And I'm super down with this. It doesn't really melt over the texture, it kind of just lays in the texture and changes color a little bit over time. I will show you one later that like melts over the texture, and that's kind of a precursor to drippier glazes. But this right here is gorgeous. The one very small issue that I've always had with Celadon glazes is that they do such a good job at looking through texture that you basically can't mess up the form at all. The cup needs to be extremely clean. For example, I had a little bit of underglaze. Where is it? I could probably find it. Yeah, there it is right there. For example, I got a tiny bit of underglaze on this cup right before I glazed it, and you can see through the body, and now it's just there. If this was almost any other glaze except for this super clear see-through non-opaque Celadon glaze from AMACO, this would probably just mold right into the glaze. You wouldn't be able to see it. But because it's such a see-through glaze, you can very easily see it. So with these types of glazes, especially the really good AMACO ones, you kind of have to make sure that everything's super clean on the cup. Let's take a look at the next cup. The next cup I did something a little bit different. Now the next mug is a little bit different because I did something without you on screen. I got a separate bottle, I put a little bit of water in the glaze in the other bottle, and then I was like, oh, it's kind of thick right now, but I didn't want to contaminate the entire thing because I felt like it would contaminate the test itself. So I just put a little bit of water in it and then I glazed this with that bottle itself. That being said, that little tiny bit of water that I put in here to make it a little more movable made it like blue, like a blue Celadon, because now that means that I can buy this glaze and get two different colors out of it if I add a little bit of water. I have no idea why it turned out blue. The high majority of the time, green glazes like this have like copper in them or some type of like green mason stain or something. It's very rare to get like a nice blue like this out of some copper. It's possible. It is possible when you make glazes, that is, but it's just kind of rare, and I didn't think I can achieve it by just adding a bit of water. Granted, this is just a tester mug, so I don't really care what happens to it on a real level. Like, I might use this for myself, I might give it to one of my patrons, but like, it seems really weird that I have an earthbender symbol on a blue mug now when I kind of expected it to be green. But it is my fault because I added water just to see what would happen. But you see what I'm talking about, right? Like, the difference in color is very apparent once you put them next to each other. But you see what I'm talking about, right? Like, these two mugs are technically out of the same glaze body. One just has a tiny bit more water in it. How much water? I didn't really measure. I usually just do it by comfort level. But these two are the same glaze with a little bit of water in it in a different bottle. And I find that amazing. I could buy this glaze and get like a sky blue and then a deep Celadon green out of it. That's amazing to me. I actually did a third mug over here with Randy's red that kind of echoes back to the podcast that Lindsay and I have, the Mud Peddlers. I don't usually make Mud Peddlers merch very often, but I kind of figured, hey, why not? I give it to somebody I like. This is the watered down version of the glaze, but with a little bit of Randy's red on the top. And you can see the melt of the Randy's red way better than you could over here. And I like it far better on this than I do this. To be honest with you, like this green glaze is kind of common. I can make this myself with my own chemicals. But this sky blue, I actually have to mold together a bunch of different carbonates and oxides and do some calculations because I don't have a recipe like this myself yet. So I really like the way it melts. I really like the way it looks. And this is a beautiful kind of sky blue that came out of a green glaze bottle. You know, and I don't know if you can see it too easily because the sun is kind of like a weird angle at the time of day it is right now, but I can totally see microcrystals right there through the lens of my camera. These little tiny crystals right there. And I love that. I know exactly who I'm giving this to. I love this so much. Don't get too excited, okay? For those of you who know about my podcast, like, don't think I'm just making these all the time. Unless you guys bug me to make them all the time. I really like these three. I enjoy this one the most because it has the most compatibility with my Randy's Red. Usually, I will get down to like this part of the bottle of glaze for AMACO glazes, and then I'll go, I got a little bit of water, and then I'll get like this much glaze. And it becomes much easier to mix, much easier to shake around, and a lot of the times, a lot of bottle glazes have like gum in them. Gum is essentially a chemical that makes them more brushable or a little bit thicker. I'll leave that there because it's way more complicated than that. These are all fine and dandy, but I really want to show you the teacups. These two teacups were glazed with the original glaze. I didn't put any water in this batch right here. This is the original bottle that I have over here to my right with no water added. So it shouldn't look too blue or anything like that. But this is also a red clay body, which means that it's gonna act a little bit different than it would on those white clay bodies that I just showed you. To boot, there's some green underglaze on this, and I put some black underglaze on these little drawings on the inside of it. I say little drawing, but it's just a branch with some leaves on it. Love this. I don't know why I love this. I don't know why I don't do this too often, because I do know how to carve images into my cups. I just don't do it that much. But they came out essentially the same. You can really see that darkness when I put the underglaze inside the branch and the leaves. You can also very clearly see the underglaze that I put on here right here. The only thing is that the glaze itself is so clear that it doesn't really take. There's one thing to note here, and this happens a lot with brown clay bodies, is that these Celadon glazes are so clear and so non-opaque that you can actually see through to the clay body, which is kind of its job. It's doing its job, it's working as intended. But because of that, when you put it on a brown clay body, you can barely see the original color of the glaze itself. If somebody who makes their own glazes gave me this cup, was like, I made this glaze, you'd be like, would you put like 0.1% copper in here? Like, why is it so weak? It doesn't really look green to me, but it's doing its job. It's just on brown clay, it tends to look like this. I think this space right here really defines what I was talking about, because right here you can see the pure glaze, but you can also see the underglaze that I put on there very clearly through the glaze because it's so non-opaque. I think you potters know this channel well enough by now, and you've seen enough glaze reviews to know that whenever they put a color on the bottle, I hate when it comes out not this color, and this definitely is the color they promised us, so I'm pretty happy with it. On top of the fact that I can use it another way, and on top of the fact that I can use it another way, it adds versatility to the one glaze that I bought. Now when I buy this glaze, I don't think, oh, well, I'm getting the color green and all my stuff's gonna be green for a while. Now I grab this and I go, cool, now I can get stuff that's green, now I can get a little bit of stuff that's blue. If I add a little bit more water to it, I can let it dry out, I can get that green back. Now I can do my etchings, I can put underglaze on stuff. There's versatility to this glaze, and that's why I'm so happy with it. It's like, you know, it's like your dad was like, oh, get in the car, kid, we're going to the zoo, and then you actually went to the zoo instead of Home Depot, and you're like, wow, maybe Randy's not such a bad stepdad after all. And then you got to the zoo and he bought you food and took you to see all your favorite animals. Your new stepdad not only gave you exactly what he promised you, he made that experience way better, and he showed you how to trust him a little more. I love my new stepdad. I mean, I don't really have a stepdad. That was just kind of like a correlation. You guys know. I ain't got no dad. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me in this glaze review today for the test of C-49 Rainforest from AMACO. Hopefully this helped you out somehow. I feel like just getting the color that they promised you on the bottle is kind of standard by this point. But the other experiments that we did, proving that you can get versatility out of this glaze, is the thing that I would be looking for if I was watching a glaze review. So hopefully this information helped you out. If you did, hit that like button. Hopefully you have a fantastic time with your next art project, and I will see you, Dirty Potters, next week.
Thank you for your patronage.
I mean, I don't really have a stepdad. That was just kind of like a correlation. You guys know. I ain't got no dad.